I made a recent video where I hired people on Fiverr to take this sketch that I made and render it using Photoshop or any other program however they wanted to render it. And I wanted to do the same thing with my community on Discord. So I provided the sketch on Discord, I had them download, and they were to render it however they wanted using whatever programs they wanted to use. Now let's go one by one talking about what I like and what I don't like, and most importantly, what could be done to make them better. I haven't organized these any specific way, they're just organized alphabetically based on the person's Discord name. Now I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is that the perspective is not drawn properly, and everybody understands that. But that's not the important thing in this effort, because everybody's going to base their drawings off of the sketch that I did, and my sketch is the one with the messed up vanishing point. So just put that aside. That's not really the important thing here. Ultimately, if you're going to be doing a professional work, you do want to pay attention to the vanishing point. But from this point on, just ignore it, because that is not the important thing here. The important thing is the scene that these people created with what they were given. And so to start us off, we have Axe here. And Axe created a rendering that, in my opinion, is just extremely clean and extremely professional. The background is exactly what it is. It's in the background. It's not trying to be in the front or the subject. So the way that he blended it into the back by giving it some sort of higher exposure or brightness makes it blend away very nicely. I also love the creativity in this one because it doesn't look like it's a house in the mountains. It looks like it's actually a house that's floating. So the fact that he doesn't give us any hint as to what this house is sitting on, because he covers the whole landscape with clouds, allows you as the viewer to wonder where the heck this thing is sitting on. Is it a real place? Is it a real mountain that is just covered by clouds, or is it imaginative render that just makes the house sit on the clouds? Who knows? But that's really one of the most beautiful things about this rendering, in my opinion. The stairs look like they're handmade, which just adds more to the character of the rendering. And so if I was to make this rendering better, obviously the perspective would be one of the things, but that's not Axe's fault. Again, I'll point out that that's my fault. And everything else looks great. I really can't add anything. Maybe making the shadows a little bit darker so there's more contrast, and maybe doing some work on this glass, because I think that out of the effort that went into the whole rendering, the glass is the one that has the least amount of effort. It doesn't look terrible, but it could use more work. Other than that, everything looks beautiful, and you did a great job with this one, Axe. Awesome. The next one is from Becky, and Becky seems to have had fun with this one. She added some cartoon scales in the front, this checkered pattern here, this metallic copper, all these different types of materials, and I really appreciate the creativity. She also paid attention to the comment that I made about wanting the rendering to be on Mars, and I think that's super cool. Now, how can we make this better? To make this better in the future, I think you should try not to have the materials and the colors compete too much with each other. What I mean by that is, for example, you look at this mountain in the back, it's very overpowering. It's almost like that mountain wants to be in the front of the picture. And so something you could do is try to make that not stand out so much by removing some of the contrast of the shadows. So basically either choosing a new image or washing it down a little bit so it's not so powerful. Next, the colors of the materials that you have here, they weren't color graded, so everything, all these different colors are tugging at the focal point. And so I would take some time to bring down the saturation a little bit and maybe spend some time learning about color grading. I think that's really going to make this rendering look way better if you're able to do that. Also, spending some time to make your shadows darker is really going to help you, and making the landscape part of the building. So right now it looks like the landscape is this flat image and the building is this three-dimensional image that sits on top of it. And I think what you should do is take some time to blend the image into the architecture so that it looks like the building is sitting in the landscape, not sitting on top of it. And then one last thing is pay attention to what you want the style of your rendering to be. What I mean by that, before you start a rendering, you have to decide what you want your rendering to be like. Do you want it to be realistic? Do you want it to be art-like? Do you want it to be diagrammatic? Do you want it to be conceptual? Do you want it to be cartoony? There's so many different identities that you can go with, and whichever you choose is honestly up to you and fine with me. So I would have gone with one specific choice. You could have either gone with the realistic approach here and here, where you're using real materials to dress up the building, or you could have gone with this conceptual style. I think you did try to use a material here, but it's so underexposed that it looks way too dark and I can't see any details. So it kind of looks like you just dropped a brown color in there, and that's okay. But try not to have all these different styles blended into one rendering, because it's going to make it go all over the place. So those are my tips on how to make this better, and overall good job, and I appreciate it. Next we have Leon, and I'm going to mention one thing before I move on, and that's the way that I pronounce Leon. A lot of you guys get kind of annoyed with the way I pronounce Spanish words, and that is actually because I'm Hispanic. So if I'm going to say a Spanish word, I'm going to say it the way that I know how to, which is in my language. And so I don't know why that bothers people so often. So when I see this name here, Leon, he had something that's called an acento on top of the E. So that's how you pronounce his name. And so people want me to say Leon, but to me that just sounds wrong when I say it. So in the future, if you hear me say words in Spanish and they annoy you, I do apologize for you feeling that way, but understand that that's how I say things. So now moving on away from that and onto the important thing is the rendering itself. And I think this one is magnificent. Totally beautiful. What I've been talking about, the color grading here, it makes so much sense. Notice how the colors appear everywhere, and those colors are pinks, reds, green. They're also part of a palette. And what I mean by palette is, take a watermelon, for example. Those colors exist together in nature, so they look nice. So you have greens, you have whites, you have blacks, you have reds. All those colors exist on a watermelon, and all those colors exist here. Those same colors exist on a parrot. So he basically took this parrot and spread the parrot's colors all over the rendering. And so that is what I mean when I say a color palette. So this is why this rendering looks so pleasing to the eye. He also seems to have made his rendering in an environment that is either toxic, that explains that geodesic dome mesh thing that's on the outside, or maybe it's on another planet, and so it creates its own atmosphere by doing that. And so a lot of creative points he gets for doing that. So things that he's doing right here, he's using his creativity to create an environment that looks amazing. He's using the people in his favor to add to the realism of the environment that he's creating. Something that I love so much that I haven't seen anybody do is that they turned this building, this one-story building that I had designed, he turned it into a facility, a multi-story facility. You are very creative in the way that you render and you tell a story. Also, the quality of your work is amazing. Now, if you're wondering what kind of critique I would offer you, that would be the missed opportunity of not adding a pigeon to the scene and adding a parrot. Come on, you just don't do that. But good job overall. I really like this one, 100%. Next, we have one by Master Ninja. I want to point out that Master Ninja messaged me by saying that they are not an architectural student yet. And so that explains the reason why they didn't use a rendering program. They sketched this by hand on a tablet or something. And so let's be constructive here and let's offer some advice. And the advice that I would say, the quickest way that you can get better at this sketch is by making those trees more architectural. So spend a few hours learning how architects draw trees, and that's going to make the sketch like 10 times better right there. Also, try not to add so many different types of textures to everything, and because, like, for example, these clouds right here where they're just scribbles, they're really distracting. And there's different types of scribbles. There's this one that's like a signature, and then there's these thicker ones, and I think it's more distracting than good for the rendering. Then we have these lines here, which are not too bad, but when you mix them with these lines and these lines here, it just becomes too crazy. Third, you want to really work on learning about colors, which what I've been talking about, which is the hues and saturations. Make sure it's not overly saturated here. And I'm going to mention something about the perspective, but it's not what you guys think. I'm not going to say that the perspective is all wrong. And this is actually going to really bother some people, especially the haters that I have on my videos. They're gonna be like, what are you talking about? That perspective is not good at all. And there's actually something interesting about this, and what it is that this reminds me of cubism, right? So if you look at art, if you search up cubism, they don't really care about the perspective, or let me not say that. They really warp the way that the perspective looks. So the first time that I saw this, I was like, whoa, this kind of reminds me of two art styles, and one is cubism and the other one is pop art because of the crazy colors. Now, I don't think this is as successful with the colors as pop art is, but I don't know if you have any art background, but if you don't, You should look into these two styles because I think you're going somewhere with this. I'm not saying that it's working, but I'm just saying that this has the potential to be really, really interesting. So head in that direction, check it out, and let me know what you think. But I really appreciate this effort. Thank you so much. Our next rendering by Punter is the first one of its kind, and that's the first time that someone makes this house on Minecraft. So I congratulate you on that. I don't have too much experience with Minecraft. I don't know what you can or can't do, but just one thing that I would have loved to see would be more materials on the house. It's cool that you use these breezeway bricks and the glass and the concrete or plaster, whatever it is, but I wish you could have taken more time to use different materials and experiment with that. Also, the landscape, you didn't seem to finish it. You just used whatever landscape was there, and you should have taken some time to sculpt out the landscape and do something cool, maybe add a waterfall in the back or something. And then one last thing, when I saw this rendering, I thought it was super cool. I do think that. But I saw this like floating island thing here that just happened there, and I was like, why didn't he build this house on that floating island thing or under it? That would have been so cool. Or like carving out, because I don't know too much about Minecraft, but I don't think there's gravity in this game. So I think you could have made this house like carved into the bottom of this cliff. And you're probably thinking, well, that's not realistic, but neither is this game. So why not just have fun with the endless possibilities of the game? But overall, I do appreciate the effort. Thanks so much. Next, we have a really cool one by, I think it's pronounced Sargent Court. And this one looks beautiful. Again, the colors that you're using really work. Everything looks great. The materials that you're using look beautiful. I don't know if you made this model on a separate program, rendered it, and then added like the other effects like the background and the grass on Photoshop, or if you did the whole thing on Photoshop. I think it's the first option, but if it's the second option, I just want to congratulate you on adding this material here, this perspective. I now looking at it more, I do think you did it on Photoshop, but you did a really good job at adding this concrete texture on Photoshop, because that's not something that's super easy to do unless you do it with the vanishing point tool, but even then it's a little bit difficult. If I wanted to make this better, I would have blurred the background a little bit or used some higher quality images. I would have spent more time working on this grass, because these details here where the grass pops up over the concrete doesn't look like it's really well blended. I would have spent some time adding some shadows, not on the elements themselves, but the shadows caused by those elements. So maybe you did add a fine line right there, but I would have exaggerated just a little bit and maybe continued some of these lines through the glass just so that we can see that this is glass. And again, same thing here. It doesn't really read like glass. It might not be, but it kind of does look like it. So that's why I'm kind of confused. I'm like, is it glass or is it not? And I keep having that tug of war. So if it's not, then make it, look more like the rest of it. And if it is glass, then make it look more like glass. Make it either super reflective or transparent. And then one last thing, this is super minimal and it's super personal, and I don't mean to be super picky. So I see that you're adding people, but you didn't really take time to think about the people as you're adding them. And what I mean by that is that you have this woman that's staring off into the distance, and then you have this random farmer guy walking aimlessly into a wall like a robot, and then you have a dog that's just breaking the fourth wall and just staring at me. And so it's not cohesive at all. There's no story being told. It's just random events happening. And so to me, that's just a little bit distracting. So if you wanted to make this better, spend some time making a story with the people that you're adding in the scene. Our next rendering was provided by Victor. And Victor did a really cool job at also adding the building to Mars. What I like about it was that he didn't continue the landscape all the way through, but I wish he would have included this whole square, because this is a square that he placed this model on. I wish he would have shown the whole square so it looks like an object is sitting on top of like a little pad. So that's something that you could have done to make this better. Something that you could have done to make this work better is that if you look at this image, right, the widest white on the environment is right here, and the widest white on the building is here, right? This white is actually wider than this one. And so what that does is that it makes it look like you just pasted the house in there. So if you go on Photoshop and adjust the curves to bring this white to match more of this white here, so bringing it down the intensity a little bit, it's gonna look more like it belongs. Because right now, because of the colors and because of this low poly texture that you've added to the rock, it just feels like it doesn't belong. I love that you added this room here. It's like a conference room, and the lighting in there and everything, and I love that so much. I think it's so cool. I actually spent a few minutes looking in there and being like, what is this? And I think those are chairs, and that's like a conference table, but I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is. I like the overall design of the space. I like how creative you got with this volume here. You made it into like a mansard roof. And if I was just to tell you how to make this thing better, it would be to pick a different background, because it looks too dark to the point that it's distracting, because I'm like, it's dark, but I can see that there's something there. So I just think spending some time to work with the lighting of this image and making everything work together rather than against each other as it is right now would be something pretty easy that you could do to make this 100 times better. But overall, good effort. I appreciate it. Our next rendering was provided by Sargent, and I'm so sorry if I butchered that name, but you did a great job here as well. One of the things that I love so much about it is the texture that you used to render the house itself. Things that you could have done to fix this a little bit better is spend some time adding shadows to the people. And actually to the house itself. You didn't add any shadows to anything. Spending some time adding shadows is actually going to make your renderings really pop. Also, these plants here are just kind of like tossed there. So first of all, by adding shadow, you're going to give them a three-dimensional look. You did an okay job by playing around with the perspective of it and the size of it, so they look somewhat like they belong. But since they don't have any shadow, then it becomes a little bit distracting. And then also having some sort of planter. It doesn't have to be a physical planter, but it could be a hole in the concrete, for example, with some dirt, and then the plants are in there. But making them part of it, not just sitting on top of this like that, because if not, it looks a little bit silly. But overall, I like the quality of it. I especially like what you did to the glass here. It's a great way to render glass. I have to give you that. Last but not least, we have Zammit, and he sent me this image first, and I was going to use this to critique it, but then he sent me another one. So I'm actually not going to critique this one, but I just wanted to show it to you so you can see the huge improvement that he made. I didn't say anything. I was just like, hey, thanks for the submission. Let's talk about it. And then he actually told me, hey, I did another one. And so just look at this, what he did. And then this is the second one that he did. And this is just a great improvement on his original render. There's really not much that I can tell you here. Everything looks great. It seems to me like he used a filter to create this sketchy effect and to create this like oil pastel look to everything. I'm not a huge fan of filters, but it just looks nice. This looks like a rendering that someone who made it could be proud of. It looks like a rendering that is not distracting to look at. If you give it to a client, they'll look at it and they'll be like, wow, this is really nice. And I just think it's a very nice rendering. So really, there's not much. If I really want to be picky on this one, I could just say that your pavement has no control joints. That's those little score lines that are in concrete that prevents it from cracking. So you have it here on this concrete, but you don't have it on the floor. So adding some control joints to the pavement, and maybe just making your shadows a little bit darker. That's the only thing. If you don't agree with that comment, then by all means keep it the same way, because it does look beautiful. It looks like a work of art. And if you didn't do this with a filter, if you did this by hand using Photoshop, then I do apologize for criticizing you on that, because you did an excellent job. But I'm just letting you know that to me, it does look like a filter that you did. And then one last thing that I almost missed, but you added a dude here, and I was like, I didn't even catch that at first. I thought it was just a tree, but the more I looked at it, I'm like, that tree stump has a head. And then he's not even looking at the kids. He's just kind of standing there awkwardly looking into the house. And so I thought it was kind of funny. If you did that on purpose, that's very funny that you did that. It was kind of like an Easter egg, and I love Easter eggs. But if you didn't do it on purpose, then maybe, moving that guy somewhere else, because it really looks creepy where it's at. As we get now to the end of this video, I just want to take a few seconds to thank you guys who participated in this little exercise. I hope you guys had fun, and I hope you guys learned something from this video. For those haters that I have that are going to leave comments saying like, you're way too nice or you're not mean enough, me as a person, I like to, not only do I see the beauty in effort, but I like to offer advice to make things better. A lot of people I've noticed like to complain and say, well, this is horrible, and then they move on and they don't offer any help. And so they don't realize how much damage they're doing, because when you tell someone, hey, your work is not good, and then you just move on, that person might feel like not doing that again. But I like to encourage people, as I've always been encouraged, by saying, hey, this is good, but it could be better. And everything could always be better. So we're not trying to achieve perfection here. We're just trying to learn something new every day and get better. And that's what architecture is all about. It's about process. So I really enjoy the process. I really enjoy this. And that's one of the reasons why you'll never see me be mean to people who give effort like this. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys down in the comments. I'm Mooch, and this is Pigeon Head Architecture.